Yes, she is. Beverly Jenkins is an American author who has changing the game of literature since her debut novel Love Song in 1994. I couldn't wait to do this episode after reading one of her books, Midnight. Authors like her need to be highlighted not just for her incredible body of work, but also for the impact and influence she has had on a generation of authors, book lovers united. That's why today's episode of Wellness Through Reading is all about Beverly Jenkins, her work, her history, and also her impact on literature as well too. How she brought a light and an attention to Black stories in her historical context and made it incredibly sexy. Well, before we do that though, greetings and salutations and welcome to Wellness Through Reading. If you are returning, please, I thank you so much for coming back. If you are new, hi, my name is Tanisha. I am your host. This channel is dedicated to keeping reading a daily habit as a form of self-care. Also, to stay updated when new episodes are uploaded, please hit that subscribe button. And let's dive in talking about Beverly Jenkins. Beverly Jenkins was born 1951 in Detroit, Michigan. She's an American author of historical and contemporary romance novels with a particular focus on the 19th century African American life. Now, Jenkins' historical romances are set during a period of African American history that she believes is oftentimes overlooked, which I completely agree. Many times during the 19th century, in terms of literature, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, we typically always focus on obviously slavery because that was the big thing that happened, obviously. But very rarely at all do we get stories like the ones Miss Jenkins writes about. The stories that she writes about talks about African Americans during that time period who rebelled against the societal norms that what Black people in America and around the world should be behaving like. She also talks about family dynamics. She also talks about things like love and romance between man and woman. And so these are themes that very rarely, if at all, get highlighted. And so that's one of the reasons why she's now become one of my favorite authors of all time. But I gotta say though, it's not entirely those authors' fault, because the publishing industry as a whole just does not believe that stories about love and healthy relationships between Black men and women in literature can sell. Yes, I did say that. And yeah, so it made it very difficult for her to break into the publishing because publishers weren't sure what to do with stories that involve African Americans but not slavery. I mean, it's a love is love. I mean, why does it... Do you feel the frustration that I'm having right now? Like, it's so frustrating that reasons why we don't have more stories like this, more authors like Beverly Jenkins who write these great novels, is that there is truly this belief that just Black people don't read, which is stupid. Black people don't go to the movies. Black people don't do this, that, and the third. So the thing is, why are we creating stories for them if they're not going to buy it? Yes, we read. Yes, we go to movies. Yes, we consume art as well as any other race as people as well too. And we want to see ourselves reflected in the literature and basically in this context, the literature that we are reading. And we want to see ourselves. How does this affect our overall wellness? Well, I will say as an African American growing up, it absolutely will affect your mental health and it will affect your image of yourself, especially as you're a person of color, because if you don't see yourself reflected in a positive light in the artwork that you are consuming, then it's hard then to have something to strive for. It's hard then to have something to dream of. I mean, one of the great things about the art is that it gives you something to inspire to. It gives you a dream. It gives you inspiration. Overall, it just gives you basic inspiration. If you don't see your own race highlighted in a positive light in the artwork that you're reading, then it can be very discouraging. I know for me in middle school, a lot of the books that we read regarding Black people were either Alex Haley Roots, it was either The Color Purple, it was either Their Eyes Are Watching God. And while those are incredible novels and absolutely deserve the critical acclaim they have, those are all struggles. Those are all the struggles of Black people. And while yes, Black people absolutely have struggled, and we do need to talk about that, can I get at least one book where we're talking about love? Can I get one book where a man, woman falling in love and it's not a stereotype? It's just a good book. Can I get that? And not only that, but other races also. As a world as a whole, can we just get a book that is not so the frustration right now I'm feeling is overwhelming. But for me, can I just, as an African American, have authors who write from the perspective of African Americans rebelling, smart, intelligent, beautiful people who are in those same historical contexts, but also show them love as well too. And that is why I want to highlight Beverly Jenkins, going back to her and all of the novels that she has written, because her novels truly have been absolutely groundbreaking in this field. Well, let's take it back. The genre of historical romance, obviously it's a fiction, it's a piece of work, but the actual events that are talked about or taking place in these novels actually did happen. It's kind of like, for example, for my Louis lovers out there, Forrest Gump, for example. Now, Forrest Gump covers several decades in American history, including war, like the Vietnam War. Now, was there a man named Forrest Gump who was in the Vietnam War? Probably not. But the events that occurred did happen, but in a context of the story that they're trying to tell. So, there you go. Also, historical contemporary romance. And yes, it definitely does get spicy. So, whew. All right. So, but before I dive in and do a good old one of my favorite book reviews, I want to introduce Beverly as a groundbreaking author, well known for intertwining historical accuracy with a passionate romance that you will definitely need some water for. All right, so Jenkins, as I said, was born in Detroit in 1951 to her parents, a high school teacher and an administrative aide. Jenkins grew up surrounded by words. Her mother read to Jenkins while she was literally still in the womb and bought her cloth books when she was just a baby. Jenkins would chew on the cloth books while her mother encouraged her to eat those words. If talk about manifestation in your child's dreams. So Jenkins would read widely at her local library. That's why we must always go to our libraries. There are underutilized sources, especially everything from Alice in Wonderland to Dune to Zane Grey to any early romance writers like Victoria Hall, Mary Stewart, and Phyllis Whitney. Her early writing began while she was an editor in her elementary school newspaper. Jenkins would go on to attend Michigan State University in the spring of 1969. Before I continue any further, if y'all hear any noises in the back, like a dog barking or like things whirring, forgive me, my neighbors are being very loud today, so sorry. But let's dive back in. Jenkins worked full-time at Michigan State University Library Circulation Department. Every lunch hour, she would read articles from the Journal of Negro History, that's what it was called. Now it's called the Journal of African American History. Eventually, Jenkins and her husband moved to Ysanti, forgive me if I'm butchering that, where she worked at Park Davis Pharmaceutical References and began writing romance novels for fun. This was her side hustle, essentially, but it became her main hustle. But, again, as always, book lovers, never give up on your dreams, especially if you have it in your heart to write your own novel, then, hey, you might be famous as Beverly. At the suggestion, however, of a colleague, Jenkins looked for an agent and publisher. And Avon published the book publishing company Avon published her first novel, Night Song, in 1994. Though Jenkins has published many books in the romance subgenres, the majority of her books are historical romances. Jenkins likes to call herself a kitchen table historian. She's likened African history to a quilt with some pieces ripped out, the pieces belonging to minority history. Jenkins uses her books to weave the quilt back together by revealing patches of her Black history that are rarely taught in school. Slavery and the Civil Rights Movement are important pieces of African American history, but they aren't the only pieces. For example, her first three novels, Night Song, Vivid, and Indigo, feature characters such as a school teacher, a cavalry officer, a female doctor, and Underground Railroad heroes. They were all inspired by true history, but obviously by true characters, but the characters themselves are fictional. And also the book review that I'm going to be doing later on in this episode, Midnight by Beverly Jenkins, it stars two characters. One is this kind of like rogue rebellion who is fighting in the Revolutionary War. And the other is the daughter of a very staunch father who was in love with the king and was very much a supporter of the king and his very high tax requests. So it's definitely a tale of star-crossed lovers. Now, whether or not that those two characters actually existed in real time is what history remains to be seen. But Revolutionary War, the fact that black men in particular, obviously, were recruited in that war in hopes that slavery would be abolished, those were actually events that absolutely did happen. So not only are you getting a really good romance story, but you're learning about some history as well too. American history, not just black people history. And Jenkins found all the inspiration for Forbidden, another one of her favorite novels, from two interesting bits of history. First, she read news articles about a high-end African-American run hotel that was uncovered during the archaeological dig in Virginia City. And she also heard about a man seeing a black woman walking through the desert with a cook stove balanced on her head. So Jenkins includes bibliographies with her historical romance so readers can read further if they choose. Now, when Beverly Jenkins first started writing romance and women's fiction, she intended to have an audience of one herself. But roughly 60 books later, Jenkins has known for introducing readers to little-known histories of African Americans in the 19th century, and amid tales of complicated, strong heroines and the men that grew to love them. Actually, an interview that Jenkins did, she was asked a question. Do you have any key relationship advice that you've learned from writing romance novels? And her very blunt answer is no. I think we bring what we bring. Well, I think we bring what we bring from our life to our stories. We're all over the map. We're women who were scientists, women who are marine biologists, women who were teachers, women who were lawyers. Everybody brings their experience to the table, and then you let the characters explore and take you where the story is going to take you. The characters do what they do, and you hope you can keep up sometimes. But I love what I do, and I love the romance genre. It's a female-driven armed capitalism. We are all small business owners. We are all out there for women. And I must say, in many of the interviews that I've seen of her, she's very blunt, she's very straightforward. She's the type of woman that always knew who she was and knew what she wanted to do, and she just went out there and got it and did it. And she is so encouraging of other women to do the very same thing as well. Which makes sense if you look at all of her main characters, especially the female characters well too. They're not just, even if they're a homemaker, they're not just these weak, feeble women. They have minds of their own and they know what they want. So, very much so. So speaking of strong female characters, it's that time, favorite time of the podcast, where I go over my book review for Midnight. I have been wanting to do this book review for a very long time. But before we dive into that, quick word from our sponsor for today. Ladies of the podcast. All right, this one is specifically for you. So, I have a cool new product for you. It is Semaine Health Supplements. Semaine. These are supplements that are designed by women for all walks of our lives. The one that I really like now, I discovered Semaine supplements a few years ago. Now, I am a woman who experienced extremely painful menstrual cramps, but I gotta say, with these vitamins packed with all the great nutrition like magnesium, vitamin D, and so much more. And I gotta say, ever since I started taking Semaine, I don't get those painfully blistering cramps anymore. And I do owe that all to Semaine. So, you want to get your first bottle? Head on over to SemaineHealth.com. That's SEMAINE health.com. Use the promo code Wellness Through Reading to get 15% off your first bottle. I thank you so much for listening. Let's dive back into the episode. All right, so the moment I've been waiting for, and I hope you've been waiting for as well too, the book review of Midnight by Beverly Jenkins. Before I go any further, just a fair warning, there will be spoilers in this book review. You have been warned. So, Midnight by Beverly Jenkins was originally published October 26, 2010. Now, this incredible story starts off with the prologue. All right, first let's talk about the historical backdrop. So the story starts in December of 1974, and that's very important in terms of American history. Again, I say emphasize American history, not Black American history, because Black American history is American history, period. So, American Revolutionary War. It first started in April 19th of 1975. So we're roughly a year, well, no, not really a year, December 1974. So we're roughly like 5 months before the start of the Revolutionary War. And the city where this is starting in is Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts. So if you know anything about the Boston Tea Party, that's already occurred at this point. So mind you, there is a whole bunch of tension between the American soldiers and the British soldiers. British soldiers want to keep the monarchy in America. American soldiers obviously want them to mind their own business. You know, their taxes are just too high and they're not even giving us a seat at the table. So we got that going on. But also, slavery obviously is still very much highly present in the southern states as well too. But there are freed Black people who have wondered, and through most of the characters that we read about in this novel, they are either Black people who bought their way into freedom. They either came here from another country and they moved into the northern states, or they were born free because they were children of freed Black people. More on that. And it's important to know that while the characters obviously in this are fictional, their bibliographies are not well, but I guess you can call it a bibliography. Their stories, let's say that their stories are absolutely of what a typical freed Black person living in the North would be like. And yes, it is important to highlight the fact that there were freed Black people during this time period. So, and I'm glad that Beverly Jenkins uses them as her characters in this storyline. That we were there and we did fight in the Revolutionary War, contrary to what many people have said. More on that in a little bit, but let's go back into the story, shall we? So we start off with one of our first characters. His name is Primus Gray. He is essentially a spy. He is one of the members of the Sons of Liberty. And the Sons of Liberty were an actual political group. They were active in the 13 American colonies founded to advance the rights of the colonists and to fight taxation by the British government. And they played a major role in most of the colonies, battling the Stamp Act as well too, and throughout the period of American Revolution. I mean, obviously depends on what history you want to read in, they could be considered either, American heroes, or by the British side, they could be considered terrorists, because they did do a lot of things as well too. But again, so we got this Primus Gray character, who is essentially a rebel, and he's working on the side of the Sons of Liberty to essentially remove British rule in America. And so he's meeting up with this woman who is codenamed Midnight, hence the name of the book. She warns him that his name essentially has been brought up by the British soldiers, and that they're going to essentially try to arrest him. And so, he does, but he gets his information, but unfortunately he gets it too late, because just as she leaves his home, there's a pounding on his door, and that just made my heart drop, and it's the representative of the king, and they take him away. I'm not even sure if I can say this word on this channel, but essentially they delete him for being a traitor, a treason. And so it was so that was the prologue. I mean, already we have a man who's just trying to do good, and he gets branded by treason. But we do get insight into this lady Midnight character. She seems like a good person because she does warn him. But then you're thinking, was that a setup? So we don't know a lot about the Lady Midnight, but we definitely will. So then we go onward to Boston, March of 1775. Now keep in mind, though, that the Revolutionary War started in April of 1775. So we're roughly a month away. So already tensions are already high from what happened to Primus Gray. Now they're even higher now because war is basically imminent. So we start off with our one of our protagonists, Faith Kingston. She is basically the daughter of a freed man, Stuart Kingston, of Jamaican heritage as well too. So basically, she is made to cook, clean, do all the work around this hotel because her father owns a hotel which he allows a lot of the British soldiers to use for rest, relaxation, and whatnot. And he's a staunch British capitalist monarchist. I believe the word is for it. Yes, he loves the king. He absolutely adores the king. Everything that he does, the queen's rule is just law, and so he absolutely despises the Sons of Liberty. He despises anything anti-monarchist. And what does Faith believe? We will find out. And so we go onward. And so basically a lot of the soldiers during this contact of the story have been meeting at the family hotel. And so Faith has been listening in on some of those conversations as well too, and passing information along to the Sons of Liberty. So we have a father and daughter with two very different political opinions as well too. And it makes sense because the father is not a good person. He's very greedy, very rude. He makes his daughter do all the work while he just lays around and just spends all the money. And her mother died of the pox outbreak in 1757, leaving her then 8-year-old daughter to be raised by her father, who was overall just not a good parent. So she's living a very hard life. So that's our protagonist, Faith Kingston. And then we have our other protagonist, Nicholas Gray. So Gray, again, he is the son of Primus Gray. Now, father and son had a huge falling out pre this story, but now he's come back to Boston to make amends with his father. But while he was away, he was a smuggler and a mercenary by trade. He fought with the French and native tribes against the British during the French-Indian War. So he wasn't quite sure what kind of reception he received from his father, who prior to him leaving was actually a strong loyalist. That's what they call it, loyalists, people who are loyal to the king. But he finds out from one of his neighbors that in fact his father was deleted by the loyalists. And obviously this is a huge shock to him. Like, why would people think? He finds out that his father was actually working with the Sons of Liberty to pass information to people. And so he goes like, who betrayed him? And he's like, we don't know who betrayed him. We don't know who would. His father was a good man. But he did have an arch rival. And his arch rival was Sean Kingston, Faith's father. So you already get a lot of tension with that. He's like, oh, okay. I mean, Sean Kingston and Primus Gray had a long-standing rivalry that for a very long time no one knew why. Just Sean Kingston absolutely just hated that man. Hate's a strong word, but it's a perfect word to describe how he felt about him. So, not wanting to jump to conclusions, but obviously because of the animosity, it's quite easy to believe that Nicholas would think that Sean Kingston had something to do with his father's arrest. And yes. So here's what happens. So Sean Kingston goes on and has a small little fete at his home. Nicholas Gray decides to attend. And so as this soiree is going on, he walks in. Obviously, he and Primus Gray to see each other. He sees Nicholas Gray and Sean Kingston see each other, and automatically he looks just like his father, so he knows that's the son. And while he's there, he gets a look at Faith Kingston, and he's looking a little too hard at her. And Sean Kingston notices as well too, and he's like, no way, not my child. So we got a star-crossed lovers storyline going, which honestly I love. I love a good star-crossed lover story. Actually, correction. So the father's name is Stuart Kingston, not Sean Kingston. I'm thinking of the singer, but sorry. So yeah, so the father, Stuart Kingston, and Nicholas Gray kind of get glimpses at each other, and he's like, why are you here? Why are you in my home right now? You and your father and I were never friends. Like, yeah, you and my father weren't friends, but I have nothing against you. And so he's like, okay, I'll let you stay for a little bit. By a little bit, I do mean a little bit, because he notices that Nicholas is staring at his daughter, and so he tells him to leave. And so eventually he does. But, I mean, Nicholas actually does hang around the lodge a little bit later just to see, what type of, just to see if he is in fact a spy for the Loyalists. But what he finds is something very different. He finds someone sneaking out, but it's not Stuart, it's his daughter Faith. So Faith Kingston passes along information to the Sons of Liberty via letter to one of the other safe houses as well too, another woman who she's very close with. So she passes the letter along to her, and so as a way to, in case she gets caught, the other woman gives her eggs to kind of travel back with. This is important because as she walks back to her family lodge, she's confronted by Nicholas, and he asks her, what's a woman like you doing out at a time like this? And she says, I came to get some eggs. And he's just like, yeah, you're not out for some eggs. Like, eggs? Seriously? That's the excuse you're gonna give me right now, eggs? And so it's like, yeah, eggs, that's why I'm here. And so you kind of get this. So not only is it a star-crossed lover's tale, but it is also an enemies to lovers tale as well too, because at first they don't trust each other. They're intrigued by each other, but they don't trust each other. So you have kind of those tropes in here as well too. But eventually, though, they do fall for each other. But I mean, throughout the story, though, I will say that they do have these encounters at night, and it's important to know that it is at night, because what we find out as the book goes along, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, Faith Kingston is the mysterious Lady Midnight. So she was actually the woman who tried to warn Primus Gray, but it was too late by then. She got the information too late. Had she gotten it to him sooner, maybe she could have saved him, but it was just too late. And so throughout their kind of numerous meetings where she kind of is passing information along to the different revolutionary leaders, she runs into Nicholas as well too, who's still trying to figure out, because he finds out that it was Lady Midnight who told her father that he was about to be arrested. So he wants to find her to see if she knows more information about the man who betrayed him, because there was someone who betrayed the father, and that's why the king's men found him. So that's really what Nicholas is after. He's after revenge. And so they kind of have, I mean, it's all the goodness and wonderfulness that you want out of a romance novel and then some. And I will say that the major turning point in this book is when her father is like, listen, I need a male heir and you're not it. So, obviously because you're female. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to marry this guy, Prince Hall, who's a man that has been pursuing Faith for the longest time. She's not interested because he's drier than dirt and just doesn't know anything. And he's just low-key, just, ugh. That's the best way to describe it, just, ugh. But yeah, he's a no-no. And Faith said, I'm not marrying him, you can't make me. And then the father slaps her. So then she's like, you know what? I'm not taking this anymore. You have worked me like a dog since I was a child. I'm leaving. So she gets up and she leaves. And so the father's like, listen, if you leave this lodge, don't you dare come back. Leave with what you got on. As a way to try and control and manipulate her. But then she was like, you know what? I'm done. So she leaves. So she leaves with what she's on, but it's in the middle of an ice storm, mind you. So she's trying to get to Blythe's home. This is a woman who she's friends with, and she gets caught in this huge ice storm in the middle of Boston in, like, I think it's early April at this point. So we're right close to the war almost starting. And it's in Boston, so you can imagine the weather is absolutely terrible. So then we cut back over to Nicholas Gray, who's in his home. He looks out his window and sees a woman collapsing basically almost in front of his home. He runs out and sees that it's Faith. So he brings her inside and basically nurses her back to health after 3 days of her just being absolutely exhausted from fighting literally a winter storm. And so as the process, I mean, post-costuming, sharing the same bed, in front of a fireplace, in front of y'all see where I'm going with this. It was hot and steamy. I'm fanning myself right now as I'm speaking. But before that, though, I mean, they do fall in love. I mean, I do get a sense. I mean, she says in her mind that, oh, I don't really love him, but there's because clearly they just met. But there's obviously an attraction there, and there's obviously a whole lot of sexual tension. Phew. But I will say, though, that he does do right by her in this time period, and he does ask that. At first, he asked her, said, "Well, why don't you stay with me as my housemaid?" And honestly, that was just, I mean, really, that was just a way for him to try and keep her close. But then he's like, you know what? I don't want you to be my housemate. I want you to be my wife. And he's like, yes, I want a wife. I want you to be her. And she was like, yes, I'll marry you. And so they actually gather their friends, very small group of people, in this one little home that they have, and they get married. They have a very hot and steamy wedding honeymoon. Stay home honeymoon, but he's one of the wealthiest men in Boston, so I mean they can afford it. But here's the thing: the father is, I mean, talk about a toxic man. My goodness, Stuart Kingston is the definition of toxic masculinity, and I will say that Nicholas Gray is the definition of positive masculinity in this. I mean, Stuart Kingston is just abusive. He doesn't like women. He sees them only for one thing. Sees them only as something to be used in the kitchen and in the bedroom. That type of just misogynistic gentleman. Whereas Nicholas Gray, even though he's a rebel and he's considered to be like this rough and tough guy, he's really he's a thug with a heart of gold. That's how I like to describe him. But I mean, going back into the story now, though, Stuart Kingston shows up at the house. I mean, first of all, he sends over a friend of Faith's to the house, saying that Nicholas Gray kidnapped her and won't let her come back home. But then she's like, no, sir, you kicked me out of my family home and told me to never come back, so I'm never coming back. Because here's the thing, the father up and remarried a woman who's actually younger than Faith. Faith's 26 in this book, and he married a girl that's basically so much younger than her because he wanted sons. And that woman doesn't cook, she doesn't clean the way that Faith did for him. And so he wants her to come back home, and she's like, no, I don't want to come back home. You told me to leave, so I did. And not only did I leave, I married this man here. And so then we find out from Stuart Kingston what happened between Stuart Kingston and Primus Gray that caused them to have a rift. Because when they first came to Boston, they were actually friends. And what happened was that Stuart Kingston was in love with Nicholas Gray's mother, and he was actually supposed to marry her, but then he had to go away. But then Primus Gray and her fell in love, and they got married and had a baby, which was Nicholas. And so when Stuart Kingston came back, he found out that the love of his life had married his best friend. And so that's why he's always hated him. And then shortly thereafter, we find out that, spoiler alert, was in fact Stuart Kingston who betrayed his father and essentially ratted him out, snitched to the loyalists, which inevitably led to him. I mean, can you imagine? You're Faith Kingston, you're in love with this man, and you find out that your father is the reason why his father is passed away. Ouch, O-E-I-O. But eventually, Stuart Kingston does get his in the end, because they do confront him about it, and he tells him everything, and then he has basically a stroke and dies right there on the spot. Which, man, not gonna lie, I kind of wished he had gotten his uppings a little more harshly, but I mean, then again, I'm of the generation of the Game of Thrones, so I might be more inclined to violence than Beverly Jenkins is. Which, I mean, inevitably, I guess you can look at it as a bigger metaphor. In the end, it doesn't really matter because we all have to die, so it doesn't matter. But, I mean, Faith and Nicholas does bury him in their family lot, so they move forward. Then they stay married, they stay happy. He goes off and fights as a black soldier in the Revolutionary War. And because at first, though, they didn't want black soldiers fighting in the war effort. Because, obviously, racism. But George Washington and the rest of them were like, you know what, we kind of need y'all, so could you help us out, please? I mean, obviously, one of the main reasons why they wanted to fight was that the hope was, if they break away from the monarchy, perhaps then they'll be able to end slavery. If you know anything about American history, it doesn't work out like that. The 13th Amendment, which basically abolishes slavery, wasn't fully ratified until 1865. So the Revolutionary War started in 1775. So roughly 100 years later, we finally get it. But history, American history, I gotta say. But I will say, for this novel, one of my favorites, definitely one of my favorites of 2024. The historical background, I learned so much just about American history in general, but also I learned so much about African American history and how freed African Americans wanted so badly to help each other out. They would put together things like potlucks and whatnot to help African Americans who were trying to buy some of their family members out of slavery. So they raised the money for them as well too. They were just, again, as always with my book reviews, I don't like to give away everything because I do want you to go get this book as well too. As much as I've revealed, there's so much more to divulge, to learn about. One of the main themes that I really got out of Midnight, at least for me, was obviously the love that was there. Love of self, love of country, love of your neighbors, love of a partner, just love. And it's with love that we're able to really overcome any of our past traumatic experiences. Also self-love as well too, because with Faith Kingston we get a lot of self-love because she's been worked as a dog since she was little by her father, so she didn't really get a lot of love there. But with her relationship with Nicholas, she learns not just about partner love, but also a lot about self-love as well too, and how smart and powerful she is as well too. She really comes into her own, especially after she leaves her father's house. And one of so love definitely is a major theme there. Also another theme is fighting for what you believe in. You see that with, especially in Faith's character, because while her father is a strong loyalist, she understands that what the British Army is doing is wrong, and she wants a better future for future generations of her as well too. So she, as a spy, a woman, because mind you, she's 26. So in this context, that's considered an old maid. She should have been married and moved on, but she's educated, she's smart, she has her own opinions, own thoughts as well too. So she's really doesn't fit in with the typical societal norms of women, but she goes against all that and becomes a spy for the opposition. She has, lack of a better term, a lot of faith in her own abilities, and that's how she's really able to overcome a lot. So just believing in what you think is right and not what is easy. So, and that, my friends, is the book review of Midnight by Beverly Jenkins. And as always, I don't give away everything in my book review because I do want you to go and get this one for yourself. I read this one via my Kindle and also audiobook as well too. So head on over to your, and also you can get it in the bookstore as well too, especially Barnes and Noble. But I highly recommend listening to the audiobook as well too. The woman's voice who's reading it is very soothing. So, with that book review right there, you see how Beverly Jenkins' work has not only thoroughly entertained us, romanced us, swooned us, but she is preserving and celebrating Black history in a unique and special way that I think will definitely inspire many, many people as well moving forward. And also just, I gotta say, so, my lovely book lovers, what did you like about this story? Have you read any of Beverly Jenkins' novels? Who are some of your favorite authors of historical romances? Comment below if you read any of Beverly Jenkins' novels or what one you want to read. And also subscribe for more videos celebrating diverse voices in literature and how it impacts our overall wellness. And I thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, I wish you all good wellness and good reading. Have a great week. Bye.